The BLM riots right here, left-wing violence, lasted 7 months, condemned mostly by Republicans, encouraged by media and politicians, the Democrats. Police force used, 23 people shot dead, 700 officers injured, 150 federal buildings damaged, hundreds of small businesses destroyed, conservatively, billions in damages. Capitol riot lasted several hours, condemned by all Republicans and Democrats, encouraged only by fringe political groups. Police force used, 1 person shot dead, 14 officers injured, 1 federal building damaged, no small businesses destroyed. Nationwide outrage for that, but no outrage for what happened with the BLM or Antifa.
If you have a problem figuring out whether you're for me or Trump, then you ain't black. Then you ain't black. If you have a problem figuring out whether you're for me or Trump, then you ain't black. Then you ain't black. Black. If you have a problem.
According to a new study, the Black Lives Matter movement is linked to more than 9 in 10 riots across America. The study defines riots as demonstrations in which any demonstrator engages in violently disruptive or destructive acts as well as mob violence. According to the data collected by the U.S. Crisis Monitor, the U.S. experienced 637 riots between May 26th and the 12th of September. Out of these, 91% of those were riots linked to the Black Lives Matter movement. These include demonstrations that have a local BLM group involved, or when the main issue of the demonstration concerns police brutality against black people in general. The study found that 49 states experienced riots during that time period. California led the nation with 86 riots during that time, closely followed by Oregon with 79 riots during the same time period. The data also showed that 7% of Black Lives Matter linked events have in fact turned violent eventually. This comes as the Black Lives Matter movement has seen an explosion of support around the world. Celebrities and large corporations have financially supported the Black Lives Matter network, which is the global arm of the movement. The movement exploded in America after the killing of unarmed black man George Floyd on the 25th of May in police custody.
Vous allez en ce moment sur le site Movement for Black Lives, un des sites officiels du mouvement. Si vous cliquez sur le bouton des dons, en fait, vous tombez sur un site qui s'appelle Act Blue Charities, qui est une plateforme de récolte de dons qui avait été créée pour aider le Parti démocrate et les candidats des démocrates. Donc, par exemple, cette plateforme de dons qui s'appelle Act Blue a récolté ce 21 mai 120 millions de dollars, je crois, pour la campagne de Joe Biden. En fait, on voit clairement le lien entre l'appareil démocrate et le Black Lives Matter. Et en fait, si vous regardez aussi sur un aspect plus concret, les émeutes qui ont eu lieu, les zones autonomes temporaires qui sont installées dans les grandes villes, je crois comme à Seattle, ça serait impossible sans l'appui d'élus démocrates qui partagent les vues et même l'agenda de ces manifestants. On est clairement face à quelque chose qui rappelle la méthodologie des révolutions de couleur, mais sur le sol même des États-Unis.
Violent morning in New York City.
Since last Friday, more than 60 people have been shot. 11 have died.
Young man executed. 1 bullet to the back of the head in a mob-style hit.
Shootings are up 130%, burglaries up 118%, and auto thefts up by 50%.
The New York City Mayor Bill de Blasio announcing a proposal to cut $1 billion from the New York City Police Department. This just a day before the budget deadline. in the city.
Here's how the NYPD will be affected. The July class of over 1,100 canceled. School safety officers shifted out of the NYPD. Crossing guards shifted out of the NYPD. Homeless outreach shifted out of the NYPD. Overtime curtailed.
These are all because of calls to defund the police, born out of the police shooting of George Floyd in Minneapolis. Mayor de Blasio claims about $1 billion of these $6 billion in budget cuts are actually coming from the NYPD.
And now we're challenging Chicago as a killing field. People are dying because of his incompetence. We can go back to the coronavirus, where he made absurd decisions.
Finally, before I let you go, Mayor de Blasio, you were on Fifth Avenue. You were painting on the street right in front of Trump Tower a Black Lives Matter big sign. Tell us why you decided to do that right in front of Trump Tower, of all places.
Wolf, it was such an important message. The people of this city believe Black Lives Matter, and we wanted to send that message to our whole city, but to our whole nation. And in fact, here was an opportunity for the President of the United States to show respect for the fact that that's what we value here. And what did he do? He literally tweeted that writing Black Lives Matter on Fifth Avenue would, quote unquote, denigrate the luxury of that avenue. That is pure racism. That is acting like an acknowledgement of the value of black people is somehow belittling, when in fact what we're trying to do is lift up people who have built this city and built America and haven't been given their respect. And it can't just be words, Wolf. It has to be action. So we're taking resources from our police department and putting it into youth programs. We're acknowledging institutional racism and coming up with specific plans to tear it down. We need to take this transcendent moment and get the most out of it. But the president, rather than having a chance to acknowledge America's original sin, he literally made it worse by suggesting that, honoring black people on Fifth Avenue would somehow make it less valuable or luxurious. I got to tell you, people are outraged by that, but more importantly, they're speaking out, and folks today felt jubilant and triumphant. We were not denigrating Fifth Avenue. We were liberating Fifth Avenue by putting those crucial words right there in front of President Trump's building.
Bill de Blasio.
Oh, he's good.
The guy's great.
Mm-hmm.
That's I love his communist tendencies. Who doesn't? For the mayor of the largest city in America to be a commie. I think that's something that we can all appreciate.
That's good, right?
Isn't it?
That's good.
And I love his do as I say, not as I do policies, too. And he described one of them recently because he didn't get he was supposed to get a permit to do the Black Lives Matter thing, right?
No.
On the street.
In front of Trump Tower?
But he didn't. Here he is talking about that.
We haven't said no to people who said if you want to apply, you can apply, but there's a process. Look, the fact is that what I decided to do with the Black Lives Matter murals, and this came out of a meeting at Gracie Mansion weeks ago with community leaders and activists who said this would be such an important thing for this city to declare officially.
So important.
That is something, again, transcends all normal reality.
Pause it for a second. Wait a minute. Okay, wait. It transcends all normal reality. No, it doesn't, Bill.
Wow.
How do you listen to that bull crap and just say, well, yeah, I guess it transcends all normal reality?
Oh, okay.
All right. Yeah, all right. Well, I guess it does. Yeah.
Oh, go ahead.
Your concern is garbage, but this concern is important.
Right.
He keeps saying that. He keeps doing it.
Remember, he's been to the park when he wasn't supposed to? Right?
Yeah.
But
yes.
But instead of normal reality, he's saying
is unbelievable.
This transcends rule of law.
Yeah.
Did he go down?
Flashback.
Christophe Castaner, George Floyd, il y aura des manifestations un peu partout en France aujourd'hui, obsèques de George Floyd aux États-Unis. Est-ce que ces manifestations sont autorisées?
Alors, elles ne le sont pas dans les faits parce qu'il y a un décret du Premier ministre dans le cadre de la deuxième phase du confinement qui interdit les rassemblements de plus de 10 personnes. Mais comme je l'ai dit hier dans mon discours, je crois que l'émotion mondiale, qui est une émotion saine sur ce sujet, dépasse au fond les règles juridiques qui s'appliquent, dépasse au fond les règles juridiques qui s'appliquent. J'invite chacun à faire attention à pratiquer les gestes barrières, mais nous ne souhaitons pas réaffirmer l'interdiction qui est de droit, qui est de fait, et il n'y aura pas de sanctions et de procès-verbal pour la participation à cette manifestation, parce qu'il y a des moments, il faut comprendre que cette émotion-là, et je le redis, qui est une émotion forte, positive, elle puisse être soutenue.
End of flashback.
Come on! Let's see the rest of this.
Such an important thing for the city to declare officially. That is something, again, transcends all normal realities, because we are in a moment of history where this had to be said and done. That's a decision I made.
But our little things don't.
But the normal process continues for anyone who wants to apply.
Yeah, for you little people.
The
but the
normal process applies to you.
It continues for you.
But what I want transcends all rule of reality.
Right.
This guy.
Yeah. I guess, you know, that's just more communist fairness, huh? That's just that's just equality.
Exactly.
That's a communist equality right
the
there.
Oligarchy.
My thing matters. Your thing doesn't. We're important. You're not.
On this action by de Blasio, the things he's been saying, it's offensive on so many levels, but I just want to pick two. First of all, on large gatherings, just imagine how that sounds when he says, we've got to stop everything except these protests, to those people who've had to miss funerals with their loved ones over the past few months, because that's the kind of gathering that the mayor won't allow. How offensive that is to those people. And then look at his PR stunt yesterday on Fifth Avenue. We've seen a lot of examples over the past few weeks and months of what's been described as performative wokeness. Stunts and symbols and superficial things that actually don't change anything in the real world. This, however, is a particularly sickening example of that. While he's painting Black Lives Matter on that particular street in New York, you literally have black people dying on the mayor's streets in New York because of his failures over policing. I'm all for police reform. I've made that argument over and over again. Sensible police reform, that's needed. What we don't need is police retreat, because that means more people will be killed, including black people, and that's what's happening on his watch. It is totally shameful.
Democrat mayor of Chicago, Lori Lightfoot, has banned violent protesters from protesting in her city, but only on her block, where her home is located. That's right, Mayor Lightfoot had the audacity to claim, and I quote, "I have a right to make sure that my home is secure," end quote. And what she means is she's spending your taxpayer money to protect her home. Meanwhile, private businesses, your businesses in downtown Chicago, are being looted. Rioters are setting private property on fire. Police are being assaulted, and the city itself is being destroyed. But the Democrat mayor of Chicago refuses to quell that violence, I guess because her house isn't at risk. This is the Democratic Party, ladies and gentlemen. They do not care about violence if you are the victim.
Democrats are being accused of hypocrisy for protecting themselves but not their constituents. Protesters are banned on the block where Chicago Mayor Lori Lightfoot lives, while the city sees a spike in shootings and murders. Lightfoot defended the move. Take a look.
This is a different time like no other. And I'm not going to make any excuses for the fact that given the threats that I personally receive, given the threats to my home and my family, I'm going to do everything I can to make sure that they are protected. And I make no apologies whatsoever for that.
Okay, this is the pure hypocrisy of many in the left, in which they deny the existence of crime and mob violence as long as it's not in their leafy suburb. Well, it came to her leafy suburb, and now she thinks that she gets special protection because, yeah, she's a public figure. And I always have to bring this up because it's very important. My neighborhood got ravaged, and half of it is still boarded up because of the looting. The shootings have obviously doubled in New York City. I wonder, has de Blasio adjusted or rethought his criminal strategy? I don't think so. I think it's going to happen again. If Trump wins, is there going to be a police force out there that's going to be willing to keep people safe from the far-left rioters? And what about the Floyd verdict, right? We don't know how that's going to go. And if it doesn't go the way that people want it to go, what's going to happen? More American chaos. And the media will pretend it doesn't happen because they're in charge of the race-baiting narrative.
They refuse to enforce law and order if the violence is perpetuated in the name of their democratic narrative. They are power-hungry hypocrites who will use your taxpayer money to protect themselves, but refuse to protect you. And by the way, guess who this violent rioting and rampant crime is hurting the most? That's right, the black communities in our nation. Thanks to the Black Lives Matter narrative and the demonization of police, black Americans are dying. But not at the hands of police, no. I'm talking about black Americans dying because violent crime in inner cities is skyrocketing, thanks to Democratic politicians defunding police and refusing to allow police to secure their cities against rioting. In New York City, for example, shootings in the city where the victims are black are up 177% in the month of June compared to the same time period in 2019. This data, according to the NYPD. Again, we're not talking about police-involved shootings here. We're talking about shootings that should have been prevented by police if police hadn't been handcuffed by the Democrats in New York City government. Remember, New York City officials voted to defund almost $1 billion from the NYPD. When? Late June, after New York City Mayor Bill de Blasio had spent months allowing riots and vandals to take over parts of the city. And now, as a result, more black Americans are being killed. That is why the American people care so much about the violent crime in our nation, enabled by Democrats, perpetuated in the name of Black Lives Matter, violence that's harming and killing black Americans.
Over the last 48 hours, we've seen rampage and killings in Chicago, but the mayor has finally come around to saying that the vigilantes and the anarchists are out of control. Never mind when they were killing dozens of black kids on the streets of Chicago and destroying businesses that served black communities. The mayor's silence was almost deafening. She was an apologist for the anarchists, for the disruptors, for Black Lives Matter Incorporated that doesn't give a hoot or a damn about black lives. They are about destroying America. It is time that we speak up, speak out, and take action. There are three words that I think that the mayor of Chicago needs to understand when it comes to these anarchists: arrest, try, and jail. Let's get busy. Let's fight back.
So for this mayor in Olympia, Washington, things changed for her pretty quickly. So Cheryl Selby, who's a progressive Democrat mayor, has stood up for Black Lives Matter. She supported protesters across the country. She's a big advocate for the LGBTQ community. You know, lots of other sub-communities that are out there, and that's fine. That's her right. But she's been ardent in her support of all of this, even throughout the violence and rioting, much of which has happened in her state, not necessarily to the national level that we've seen, at least national attention-wise, that we've seen with Seattle. But still, she's seen it all right there. But she had her world rocked and opinions totally shaken this week when her house was vandalized by guess who? Black Lives Matter.
New video of the Olympia mayor's home being vandalized. This happened during protests last night. You can watch closely. There's this one person who appeared to have spray painted BLM by the door there. The mayor sent us this video, and it also looks like a sign saying BLM, which is obviously stood for Black Lives Matter throughout these protests, was already in her window. We are also being told that a person was chanting "Abolish the police" while outside her home.
She said, the mayor, following the incident, quote, "It was kind of ironic to see the vandals struggle to find space on the wall next to my pride flag and my other Black Lives Matter poster, but she found room." She spoke even harsher, though, to the newspaper, saying, quote, "I'm really trying to process this. It's like domestic terrorism. It's unfair." It is unfair. It's really unfair. Welcome to reality, my dear.
So Jacob Frey, he wants to walk the line. What Jacob Frey is doing is what I think a lot of moderate Democrats or even some moderate Republicans in this country want to do. He wants to accommodate the radical leftist Black Lives Matter movement. He wants to entertain their wishes. He wants them to like him. He thinks there's some accommodation to be made between the radical, leftist, Marxist, How many isms can I possibly fit into this radical movement, BLM movement, and normal policymakers in this country? And he quickly found out that that is not possible. So initially, Fry walks up to them and he tells them how much he supports their movement.
Have to take responsibility here. I've been coming to grips with my own brokenness in this situation, my own failures, my own shortcomings, and I know there needs to be deep-seated structural reform in terms of how the department operates. The systemically racist system needs to be revamped. The police union needs to be put in its place. We need to make sure that everything from the union contract to the way that the arbitration functions to the way that our officers and the culture in the department behaves, it all change.
Jacob Fry, we have a yes or no question for you. Hey!
Okay, so this woman, this activist, takes over at this point. But listen to what Fry does so far. Fry grants all their premises. What are the premises? The cops are systemically racist. The cops hate black people. The cops are unjust. The cops are no good, dirty, rotten, terrible people. And then he says, we need to reform it. You know, if the cops are so rotten, as Jacob Fry says that they are, how could you possibly reform it? If they are systemically racist, systemically, not just incidentally, once or twice, every so often, but systemically racist. He's using all this negative language. And this activist woman very wisely says, okay, you're going to talk a good game, Jacob Fry. Well, let me ask you a yes or no question. Because things are so bad, will you or will you not disband the police?
Jacob Fry, we have a yes or no question for you. Yes or no, will you commit to defunding Minneapolis Police Department? What did I say? We don't want no more police. Is that clear? We don't want people with guns toting around in our community, shooting us down. You have an answer? It is a yes or a no. It is a yes or a no. Will you defund the Minneapolis Police Department? All right, be quiet, y'all. Be quiet, because it's important that we actually hear this. It's important that we hear this, because if y'all don't know, he's up for re-election next year. If y'all don't know, he's up for re-election next year. And if he says no, guess what the f we gonna do next year?
This is how they talk. This is radical Marxism, okay? Dismantling the police is one of the key features of this because they view the liberal capitalist state as intrinsically oppressive, and it's the cops are the enforcers of that. So the first key to overthrowing the entire government, overthrowing the entire society, is to dismantle the cops. That's what they say that they want to do. And so this woman takes control. She goes, enough of this mealy-mouthed nonsense. Are you or are you not going to do it? Because if you don't, we're going to vote you out. She gives him a simple question. He gives a simple answer. No, he doesn't want to defund the cops, and the crowd loses it.
What'd you say? One more time.
I do not support the full abolition of the police.
All right, get the out of here. Go, get out of here. Go home, Jacob, go home. Go home, Jacob, go home. Go home, Jacob, go home.
So he's gone. This huge crowd chases him out of there. In some ways, I give him credit because it is pretty scary to go into a crowd like this. But this guy thinks what so many squishes in both parties think, which is that they think Black Lives Matter is just about Black Lives Matter. That's what they think. It's just, oh, Black Lives Matter. I agree with that. So therefore, I agree with these guys. Doesn't realize how extremely far left they are. And he thinks that an accommodation can be made. Some kind of coming together, kumbaya, we'll meet in the middle, compromise. No, ain't gonna happen.
It is true. There's violence across the whole country. Do you disavow the violence from Antifa? That's happening in Portland right now? There's riots.
That's a myth that's being spread only in Washington, D.C.
About Antifa in Portland?
Yes.
Sir, there's videos everywhere online. There's fires and riots. They're throwing fireworks at federal officers.
That's a myth that's being spread only in Washington, D.C.
Look online. It gets crazy, Mr. Nadler.
Wow, so he thinks it's fake news.
Antifa's a myth. Yeah, Antifa's a myth in Portland. Meanwhile, the whole city is on fire, and they're trying to burn down the courthouse.
Portland, but other cities, the riots that happened particularly at the end of May after the death of George Floyd was ostensibly under this banner of Black Lives Matter and racial justice. But there was really no way for these protests to not be hijacked by violent extremists who did it over and over and over. And in the case of Portland, over 120 days of daily riots every day, happening every night. It since then has been now weekly since about September.
And at some point, you just go, what is the end goal? You know, Bloody Sunday, Selma. Those folks marched because they wanted the right to vote, and they legitimately were beaten in the street for civil rights, to have rights that they were told they couldn't have because they were not even human. And then having folks scream and yell that they're being peaceful protests, but you're not peaceful because it is violent. And I actually had a cousin who went to one of the marches and he left. And he said, this has turned into something else. This is weird. So having an African-American male marching and then leaving.
And maybe this is the Russian in me coming out, but if people wanted to burn stuff down on the streets of Moscow, it wouldn't happen for very long. Yet this has happened in America for 8 months. How has it been allowed to happen? Because we've seen police officers there trying to do something about it. We've seen even federal officers, I think, coming to some of these places. Why has it been possible for these people to set up autonomous zones, like try and make a new country in the middle of Seattle? How has that been enabled, and by whom?
So this is what I mean when I say, like, it's like the consequences of mainstreaming the far left extremist ideology of BLM Antifa has real life consequences in that it's been very strategic in delegitimizing law enforcement in America, to the point of where you have police departments in our major cities like Portland, Seattle, New York, where they're essentially hemorrhaging. And on top of that, they're being defunded by the tens of millions. Or in the case of New York City, $1 billion was slashed from their budget, with crime already skyrocketing. So there's, on one level, a lack of resources in being able to respond. And that's what happened particularly this year in Portland, with many officers either resigning or taking early retirement from the Portland Police Department. And the Bureau is unable to bring in new officers to replace what's being lost, because nobody wants to go into now what should be a noble institution, policing, when you're demonized, than when you are doxxed, when you get attacked, in some unfortunate cases, killed for political reasons.
Can you share a little bit about that experience?
It says something when you're at a Black Lives Matter protest, you have more minorities on the police side than you have in a violent crowd, and you have white people screaming at black officers. You have the biggest nose I've ever seen. And you hear these things and you go, where are these people are they gonna say something to this person? No. So, and that's just one example. Having people tell you, what to do with your life, that you need to quit your job, that you need to, you're hurting your community, but they're not even part of the community. And once again, you as a privileged white person telling someone of color what to do with their life. And hypocrisy. Absolutely, and you don't even know what I've dealt with, what these white officers that you're screaming at, you don't know them. They're getting called those names and they're being accused of being racist, when you've seen those officers helping people of color, getting blood on them, trying to save someone's life that's been shot. Gang violence, domestic violence, and you see them and they're truly trying to help save someone's life, and then they turn around and are called a racist by people that have never seen anything like that have never had to put themselves out there. It's disgusting.
And then there's also the political involvement in these calculations from things that the mayor, let's say of Portland, who's the police commissioner, but even beyond him, the city council itself, they exert immense political pressure over police departments, not just in Portland, in any city. So even though they're supposed to be separate from one another, they are linked, because if a police department has no political support from the city council and elected officials, it will really restrict what they're able to do. So in the case of Portland, in addition to the policing issues, we also have a so-called progressive prosecutor who is elected. So in the US, our district attorneys are also known as prosecutors. This is an elected position. So you can imagine if you are living in a city like Portland or Seattle, where it's entirely left-wing and and progressive, there's all the incentive in the world to be a prosecutor who will be politically motivated in his or her prosecutions. That's happened in Seattle. And in Portland, we had somebody new come in who campaigned on a platform of restorative justice, which means essentially going easy on criminals. And the thing is, a lot of people also know my work through the Antifa mugshots that I've been posting throughout the year, going through public records, finding out names, finding out charges, finding the booking photos. And I release all of this and I look into all of it because the overwhelming majority of these people, particularly in left-wing cities, had their charges dropped.
First of all, I want to thank the tens of thousands of Portlanders who've come out to demonstrate in support of racial justice and equity. I want to thank the thousands of you who've come out to oppose the Trump administration's occupation of our city. It is an unconstitutional occupation. The tactics that are being used by our federal officers are abhorrent. They do not act with probable cause.
Portland DA rejects over 540 riot-related cases. Oh, so they're just going to keep rioting, huh? Yes. They've been rioting nonstop. It's been 133 days. The National Guard's been deployed in 2 different states and is on standby in 2 other states. Great. That's the results of a criminal justice system that will not enforce its own laws. Against one group of people, mind you. Because while the Portland DA is saying, if you are far left and you want to fight cops and do whatever, you're fine. Nobody's going to arrest you. According to the Post-Millennial, the Multnomah County District Attorney released data related to the Portland protest and riot arrests, revealing that most cases since George Floyd's death were dropped, and a majority of cases were rejected in the interest of justice. The new mass demonstration protest case is the most complete data to date made available to the public regarding the Black Lives Matter, Antifa riots, and protests that have convulsed Portland since May. The overview documents filing status, dropped cases, the reasons cases weren't pursued, nature of crimes, and demographic information. Between May 29th and October 5th, there were 974 cases brought to the MCDA's office by Portland police. Many involve repeat offenders. Now, the number isn't published in the report. Nearly 70% of these cases were dropped. 543 cases were rejected in the interest of justice. 44 cases due to insufficient evidence. 12 cases due to a legal impediment, and 67 cases are pending investigative follow-up from law enforcement. A majority of cases involve suspects who are white and male. Interesting. Black Lives Matter, huh? Constituting 77 and 67% respectively. 83% of the suspects are young adults but aged 18 to 35. Juvenile data is not included. The MCDA says its dashboard will be updated weekly by authorities as crime records are entered into the district attorney's case management system. Quote, transparency in the work we do is a keystone to my administration, said District Attorney Mike Schmidt in a press release. Schmidt won in a landslide election as a progressive candidate. After coming into office, he announced a policy of decriminalizing a list of protest and riot offenses for those charged at this year's BLM Antifa demonstrations. That's right, he did. And he won't extend the same courtesy to right-wing groups. He says, no, if you're right-wing, you go to prison, bye-bye.
And we are on the front line here in Portland. We have heard you. You've asked for reforms. We passed historic reforms. We reduced the budget. And we're starting next week on the big work, which is reforming the oversight and accountability system, which I've committed to work with my colleagues to do. I know for many of you that's not enough, and I respect that, and I understand that. You're all entitled to your opinion, and the reason I wanted to be here tonight was not to talk, but to listen. And so with that, we'll allow you to take the microphone, and I will listen.
Much later.
You comfortable, Tevis? Are you comfortable? You having a good night on the town? You enjoying yourself? I think you need to do your job as a fucking mayor. I think you're a disgrace. I think that everybody in this fucking city thinks that you're fucking pathetic, Tevis. How dare you do sweeps while people are still on the streets? How dare you? Do not touch me. How dare you? You are ashamed? Tevis, you think that we're going to forget about you? We're never going to forget you, Tevis. Ever. I hope you enjoyed your little wine. You're fucked, Tevis. Start doing your fucking job. Don't talk about it. None of that. Do it. Put it in. Tevis, none of that matters. None of that matters. What matters? You know what matters, Tevis? What matters? You need to grow up, Ted. Are you joking me? The only fucking problem that we're having here is that you are an incompetent mayor. You have done nothing in the city for whatever fucking son. Kiss my ass. Fuck you to your face. You're a bitch. And every time you step out, every fucking time you step out, you are going to be made to feel like the scum you are. Fuck you. Fuck you. Shame on you. I hope your little girlfriend knows that too.
Come on, guys. Here's a funny thing. Portland Mayor Ted Wheeler moving to avoid rioters targeting his home. I mean, peaceful protesters, right? Ted Wheeler forced from his home by peaceful demonstrations that he condones. The Democratic mayor in Portland is moving from his $840,000 condo. How much money does it pay to be mayor? To avoid rioters who have repeatedly targeted the building. They should keep targeting it. I love it. That's where you should be. Ted Wheeler wrote to neighbors in his building to say it would best for me and everyone else safety and peace for him to move from the building that they tried to torch on his 58th birthday. I wanted to express my sincere apologies for the damage to our home and the fear that you were experiencing due to my position. Wrong. It's due to your decisions. Had you put people in the situation where they were safe, which literally you have the power to do, this wouldn't be happening.
Mayor Wheeler thinks we're stupid. So for weeks, Mayor Wheeler has been supporting the violent riots in his city. He's been allowing businesses to be burned. He's been protesting and rioting with the looters and the rioters. He's been accepting this. President Trump has been asking to send help to save the businesses in his town, and he has refused. Now he comes out and tries to pretend like this is President Trump's fault. I'm sorry, sir. Nobody's buying it. We don't have a short memory. We see what you're doing. We see what Democrat mayors are doing. We see what's happening. We know that you thought that it was going to be a good election strategy to burn down cities and allow your supporters to terrorize American citizens, and you thought that was going to work. And now it's backfiring. Your polls are dropping like a rock. So now you want to flip the script on President Trump. It is not working.
Lots of bad things were happening to this poor, foolish, very stupid mayor. All he has to do is call, and within 10 minutes, their problem will be over. As you know, they have to call us. They have to call and request help. All he has to do is call, and the problem will end.
That was President Trump talking about Portland Mayor Ted Wheeler, who says he is moving out of his home after weeks of protests.
This is the first morning in a few days that we're not waking up to the news of yet another riot here in Portland. And Portland's mayor has now reportedly told his neighbors that he is moving out of his own home because of the damage and fear that riots and protests have brought to his neighborhood. This comes after a riot on Monday night in which police say demonstrators set fires outside the mayor's condominium tower and inside an occupied building, also burglarizing a business to use furniture for fuel. 19 people were arrested in an unlawful assembly outside of the mayor's condominium building that has 114 units. Portland's mayor writes in an email to his neighbors that it would be best for himself and everyone's safety and peace that he finds a new home, writing in part, "I want to express my sincere apologies for the damage to our home and the fear that you are experiencing due to my position. It is unfair to all of you who have no role in politics or in my administration."
But just 3 weeks ago, protesters broke into the Oregon State Capitol. I have heard people at these protests elsewhere saying, well, they let it happen in Portland, so why not do it here? It seems in some way the actions of these small groups that you're referring to have set the stage for what has happened on a state level and potentially a national level. I know you said it will take time to crack down on these groups, but do we have that time?
Are you blaming me for what happened at the U.S. Capitol? I don't buy that premise at
No.
all.
Black, 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 black. You ain't black, 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 black. You ain't black.